Hi, everyone. Gene here. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, where every single week we answer the most common and uncommon questions about tapping and how to get the most out of your tapping practice so you can eliminate self-sabotage. We have a really great conversation today about performance. Before we jump into the show, I just wanted to tell you about something new that I'm offering. I have launched a program at the beginning of the year called the Core 16. And basically what this Core 16 is it is a process in which one-on-one we are going to work through the 16 core issues that I see show up the most with my clients. Typically, those revolve around the way we see ourselves, the relationships we have, and around particular emotions. They fall into those three categories. If you'd like more information about this particular program, you can go to tappingqa.com/core-16, and that's the numbers 16, tappingqa.com/core-16. You're going to want to check it out sooner than later, because I only have room for 5 people in the program, and that's not this false sense of marketing BS where it's like, I only have a limited number. It's actually true. I only have space in my calendar currently to add 5 people into this program. If you're interested, tappingqa.com/core-16. And if you have questions about the program after you check it out, drop me an email, gene@tappingqa.com.
I was off this, as most sports psychology guys are, for a person with the yips. I could make you feel better while your career ended. But with the tapping, I immediately got some really good results.
This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 346, originally aired January 16th, 2019. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, I have a conversation about performance. Now, Dr. Tom Hanson, who is my guest, is someone who specializes in sports performance. He mostly works with elite athletes at the collegiate level, as well as elite athletes who are professionals, particularly in baseball and softball, because that's kind of the space that he grew up in. But if you are not an elite athlete, if you are not a baseball player, if you are not a softball player, there's a lot of really great information in this conversation, because performance is performance is performance. And there are some unique things about physical performance that is different than the other parts of our lives that we perform in. But the concepts and the underlying principles are exactly the same. And so there's lots of really great advice in this conversation that you can use right away with your tapping to find the places that are going to make the biggest differences for you. The 2 things I'm going to highlight before we wander into the interview, just so that you're listening for them, because I think they're really, really key, is one, the conversation we have about focusing on the right things. Oftentimes, and I see this when I'm working with my clients, is they're asking the wrong question and they're focusing on the wrong thing. And that is what is holding them back, because the right thing to be focusing on, they're not doing the tapping or recognizing the emotional issues about that. So we're going to spend some time in the conversation talking about that. And then second, we spend some time talking about how you can use tapping specifically when you are focusing on the wrong thing to move your attention to the right thing. So here is my conversation with Tom. Initially, how did you get involved with thinking about and working with the idea of performance and things that get in the way of performance?
I really took a big interest in talking about and coaching around performance once I realized my own performance was suffering so badly that I didn't have a future performing. I was a Division III athlete, a college baseball player. I was very good. I maybe could have been a lot better had I had the coaching that I'm getting to my son now, the way baseball and training is. But I just wasn't exposed to high-end training, what I was exposed to was sports psychology. I needed to declare a major in college, and I like sports. So I said, oh, sports, but what's something real? Oh, psychology. And 2 weeks later, I found a book in a bookshop called Sports Psyching. And ever since that moment, really, I've been in sports psychology because it really was kind of the Reese's peanut butter cup of things for me, because it brought together my 2 favorite things. So Then I got my master's degree and then a PhD, both really in PE. I'm not a psychologist. It's really about performance enhancement, more so than, hey, something's wrong with you. So someone's listening and and there's nothing wrong with them. They just want to perform better. That's really been my focus.
So break that apart a little bit. Like most of us are familiar with, I was a Division III athlete as well. And we're familiar with, the technical training of getting better at something. As a goalkeeper, there were isolated skills that I could work on, my distribution, my positioning, my footwork, and how to do that sort of stuff. As someone who does performance and sports psychology, in specific, what are the types of things that you are working with to help the athletes do, like you said, to perform better?
Yeah, a lot of it, one way I'd like to say it is helping your tools play. In baseball in particular, use the term tools, and having the guys' tools play, or having the guys' tools show up on game day, meaning you play as well as you can. A formula that I like is performance equals potential minus interference. So performance, you perform as well as you can to your potential minus what gets in the way. And so a big focus for me is removing interference. They do the technical things. The more normal kind of coaching is around building potential, you could say, in terms of the technical skills and the physical strength to do things. But then come game time, be it anxiety, distraction, it's really the two key elements become distraction and excess muscle tension. When it gets down to it, there's things that cause those, but those are like the causal elements in my mind of performance, below your potential. So it really becomes a matter of, like, I've got a couple of figurines around here of Ganesh, to me, like the god of the removal of obstacles. And so it's like the most common thing that I get approached with or asked about is like, I'm so good in practice, but I just can't do it in a game. And so if you really can play X well, but you play X minus something in a competition, then let's work on removing that interference that's getting in your way. So that's sort of a conceptual response.
I love that. Yeah, and I love that formula as a way of looking at anything that we do, because there's so many times in our life where we do something. It's like, I do that better. I can't believe I did that poorly. I was prepared. I have the skill, whatever is there. And to look at, there is something that is in the moment that is making that kind of harder to figure out. So when you're working with your athletes, how do you, because I think you said something really interesting there. I practice it one way, and in the game, something else shows up. So since you can't have a conversation, or most times you can't have a conversation with one of your athletes in the middle of a game, how do you then figure out what is the thing that is showing up in the game situation that is getting in the way?
Well, again, if I just try and keep it simple, it's going to fall into distraction and excess muscle tension. And so there's a critical variables you want to, so in terms of both diagnosing and then helping, what are the critical variables? What's the ball? Like for a hitter, most of my focus, like for my PhD, is on the mental aspects of hitting. I interviewed Hank Aaron, Rod Crew, Stan Musial, Carly Strimsky, talked to the best people about what's your mental approach? How did you think about things? And one of the key elements, well, obviously the key element for hitting is the ball. It's a critical variable. You got to focus on the ball. And so whatever of your attention and energy isn't on the ball is apt to be result in a reduction in your performance. So a guy will be up thinking about his hands and his hand position. I go, my hands don't feel, strike one. Because I was focused on my hands and the ball went by. I was talking to a guy named Chuck Knobloch, who's retired now, but he said the first time he was up, he batted against Nolan Ryan, and a very famous pitcher, and he's like, oh my gosh, that's Nolan Ryan. And he was looking at him right in the face, and the ball zinged by him. He's like, oh my gosh, I've got to watch the ball. And so that's an example of literally taking your eye off the ball. It's a distraction from the critical variable. So to help someone, you help them identify, well, what are the critical variables here? What ought you be focused on here and here and here? My friend and co-author of a book, Heads Up Baseball, worked a lot with figure skaters. And it'd be this, to figure out, okay, as you go here, what ought you be focused on? And really clarifying what that is. And are you on it or not? And then, what pulls you off? That then usually creates a muscular tension, like an excess muscular tension. And that's where I love your stuff with beliefs. And I use it a lot with athletes, because it's like, what is a belief that you have that is then giving rise to tension, because it's like you don't feel safe. I'm not enough. Maybe I'll blow this. What will the coach think? What will the crowd think? What will the girl in the third row think? Wherever your head goes and you pull away, oh my gosh, then that creates a tension. And it isn't, obviously you need muscular tension to perform, but it's the excess or excessive muscular tension that gets in the way and has an athlete choke, as in the same way. All this applies to business or anything that you do. But sticking with sports, someone said, I choked. Well, what's up with that? Well, you stopped breathing and you contracted. That's how you literally choke, but it's also in sports how you choke. So there's some perception of threat that you have that's causing your fight or flight, your survival mechanism kicks in and goes into something that a chain of events that was apparently really helpful when you're in a tribe out hunting and gathering, but it's really unhelpful when you are playing tennis.
And it's really interesting, as you say, we get inside of our own head and we're focusing on the wrong things. And one of the things I immediately think of is basketball players who really struggle with free throws.
Yeah.
That they're in a circumstance that the rest of the game, they're in the flow of the game and they're simply responding very quickly to what is going on and where their position is and where they get the ball. Where with a free throw, literally everybody is just standing there.
Yeah.
And they have 10 seconds before they have to release the ball, and they have this routine, and it creates all of this space for them to let all of those thoughts come seeping into their brain, which gives them the opportunity to go, oh my gosh, what does the coach think? Am I going to get yanked from the game? And I immediately can see that muscle tension showing up because they're worrying about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. That falls into what's called a self-paced task. Like you do it when you choose to, like golf or a pitcher in baseball.
Right.
Or bowling. Or a serve in tennis. It's self-paced. You initiate it. And that absolutely brings in a lot more space for that distraction and therefore muscle tension if your attention goes somewhere. And that's why they have the routine, but you get so locked into the routine. I bounce,
right.
Breath, see it go in, feel it go in, do it. And so you want your mind tied up on very specific things to as a defense against distraction. Just a quick story on that. When I interviewed Hank Aaron, all-time home run leader, and he in 1974 broke Babe Ruth's record. And they said, hey, no white guy's ever going to break Babe Ruth's record. He actually got death threats. It's like, hey, you'll be in Montreal July 4th, 5th, and 6th. You're going to die one of those days. I said, Mr. Aaron, how do you hit home runs? Because if you're trying to hit a home run, you almost for sure don't. Very rare, because then you're bringing in more muscle. It's more often an accident. But anyway, the point being, I said, how did you do that? How did you deal with that much pressure? Literally death threats. He said, well, I was focused on the ball in the guy's hand. He said, you can't block out the crowd. What you do is you get so into something else that it goes away kind of on its own. But if you say, it's like hey, don't think of the pink elephant, or block out the noise. If you're living in a car, block out the noise of the car. It's like, boom, I didn't hear it until he mentioned it. And now block it out, it's pretty hard. So what a good athlete does, again, is identify these critical variables and really commit and get good at it. It's a skill, focusing on that while the crap is hitting the fan, all kinds of stuff is going on. Whether, a surgeon, you're trading stocks, whatever it is, or you're trying to blow up the Death Star. I use a little clip from Star Wars.
Right.
Where Luke is going in, he's in the Canyon thing, and Darth Vader is picking off his wingman. It's like,
Yeah.
stay on target, stay on target. Can you stay on target while Darth Vader is trying to lock in on you? And there you go.
And it's really interesting as you say that, this idea of sticking focus to the task that is in front of us, by focusing on that thing. And one of the things I talk about lots with, like just a simple thing like tapping on our to-do list. And I always know that if I'm overwhelmed, it's because I'm trying to do too much at once and it gets in the way of my performance. And if I clear the overwhelm long enough that I can start the next task, I forget about the to-do list. And I forget about everything that needs to be done. I forget about the deadline. And for the next 15, 20, 45 minutes, whatever the time is I'm spending on that one particular task, all of it melts away because I'm thinking about that thing. And the instant I look up and I look at my to-do list, the emotion comes rushing back because I'm now focusing on everything again. And this sense of focusing on everything becomes too much. But when I'm in the minutia of a single task, because that's all I'm thinking about, it makes it so much easier for me to stay focused. And I'm super productive when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I love your morning stuff, the practice that you're talking about. It absolutely could be great coaching for an athlete. And that's why I've long felt, since I got into tapping about 10 years ago, I could take a person off the street and in 5 minutes, they could be more effective than a lot of people in my field at helping an athlete because if they tap, it's such an effective tool to minimize excess tension and distraction that it clears away. And then you just say, okay, what should you focus on here? Oh, just hitting the ball. Okay. Do that.
And it's interesting you talk about that sense of tension. One of the really interesting things that happens when people tap is they will comment on the fact that the room looks brighter and colors look sharper. And the reason that that's the case is the smallest muscles we have in our body are those ones that are working the corneas of our eyes. And when we relax, all of a sudden that tension is released from the eyes, which makes it easier for us to focus. And all of a sudden we see the world as it actually is because the eyes are working exactly properly. And that's why it looks brighter and richer because the eyes are actually going to the light in the right way. And so I can see how with any action we take, be it something that is athletic or something that is work related, I know that, when I am tense, one of the consequences of that is I grit my teeth and I hold my breath. And I am less productive when that happens, that tension shows up in such a specific way that I am not thinking as clearly and I am not as sharp and I am not as quick. And when we're able to release the tension, and as you're talking about, it comes from lots of different places, all of a sudden we just do things in a more efficient way.
One of the main, I think, what's often cited as one of the most useful things that I share with athletes and also executives is that awareness as an inner traffic light. That you got this inner traffic light, and when you got a green light, you're feeling good and you go. Every pitch, say in baseball, is an intersection and there's a traffic light. Pitcher gets the ball back, check your light. You green? Yeah, feeling good. Okay, go on to your pre-pitch routine for the next pitch. Feeling a little rattled, feeling like it speeds up a little bit, or you recognize what you just mentioned with your teeth and your other attention. That's a yellow light. Now I should do something. Take a moment to stand behind the rubber, take an extra breath, or even if it's like a red light, you're really rattled, go behind the mound and practice that. I talk about there's a green light routine. Here are the things I do, just like that foul shooter before a pitch if I'm feeling good, and a red or yellow light routine. Here's what I do if I'm a little rattled. I do
That's
this,
interesting,
this, until I get as green as I can. So the job becomes, in the morning, get as green as you can. That would be one way to language what you talk about. It's like, get as green as I can in relation to my list. And you can't necessarily always feel great. No one does. A lot of the performance, the stuff that I deal with is when you have your B or C game, how do you perform well when you don't feel great? And because anyone would say, hey, I feel great. Well, it's good, go ahead. You don't really need to do much because you've really connected with the game as a one thing. But the worse you feel, the more it break the game down into little parts so you can better deal with it. And so it's like, get as green as you can and then recognize when you get yellow and deal with that to get back to as green as I can. And in effect, that's almost all I do.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I've never thought of it in that way, but I love getting to that place where we're as comfortable as we are. I can remember a million years ago when someone was helping me with my free throws, because I one time went 0 for 16 from the free throw line as a freshman in high school.
Wow.
And someone who later became a friend of mine, as I was stepping up to the line for the ninth free throw, was a cheerleader for the other team from the other side of town. And again, someone who became a friend of mine later, literally as I was stepping to the line, she clapped her hands and went, "Oh, good, this guy again."
That is a good friend. That's good friend material.
Yeah, and again, we weren't friends at that point, but later we became friends. And by the end of the season, I was really good. And the thing that really helped was, it wasn't that I developed a routine where I dribbled the ball 4 times, then I spun the ball, and then I shot it. But instead it was, I dribbled the ball until I felt that my feet were squarely under me and I was set. And that's your idea of getting to green. It wasn't that I do my hand bend and I bounce, and like, it's not a certain number of things, but it was hitting these checkpoints where the routine was physically getting me set, so I was clear as possible. So then the mechanical skill of releasing the ball was something that I could do very, very easily because I'd gotten myself into that position. And how interesting would be before every single difficult task we do throughout the day, of just asking, okay, how set am I? How, in your parlance, am I on green to be able to enter that thing? And if I'm not, what are the things I can do in the next 3 or 4 minutes to get me to close as that as possible? Because by investing those 3 or 4 minutes, by getting myself prepared to do whatever this task is, have a difficult conversation, write some content that is overwhelming, whatever that thing is, the better resource state I'm in, the more effective I'm going to be doing that. And that as a framing device, I love that as a question.
Yeah, exactly. It's like being ready. And we used to ask, when I have worked with a player, I might say, well, how do you know you're ready? And you just defined it. It's like, I'm gonna dribble the ball until I'm ready. Some guys, it's 3. I'm gonna dribble it 3 times, take a breath, and that's more common. But people sometimes then again get into this routine where they think it becomes about the routine, and they forget that the routine's purpose is to get you green, is to get you really ready, where I've got my optimal physical state and I'm locked in on the critical variable. And so that's why I love what you're saying there. Because everything is like has Goldilocks. As I get older and more into it, it's like everything's Goldilocks. There's too much, there's too little, there's just right of anything. And there's yin and there's yang, because a hitter's got to be aggressive, but also be patient.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
How do I do that? And the pathway to that is what we're talking about here, which is paying attention to your state. A phrase I use is feel good first. Okay, I'm gonna do that. Okay, feel good first. What most of the time, what we do, myself included, because I hardly just live life in totally conscious.
None of us do.
Is there have your state be a lagging the event, as in it comes behind or after. It's like, I got a hit, so I'm the man. I got out, so I stink. Right. And we're oh wait, how about feel good first? Right. Because what you focus on, you feel. So let's focus on times I've really hit the ball well. I can go back to this home run I hit in American Legion ball in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, grand slam off this light tower in left center. I can still hear the ball. And as I even talk about it, I get jacked up because it was awesome. And as I go back there, I focus. Now I go hit. I want to go hit right now. Maybe we can wrap this up, and I go hit because that's what I'm focused on. I feel I'm going to deliberately do things to feel good first, and including, of course, tapping as a super powerful tool.
So I love some of the things that we've hit so far. This idea of figuring out what is the critical variable, what is the thing that we actually want to be focusing on. Second is recognizing the resource state that we are in, getting as clear as possible so we're as ready as we can for whatever the task is in front of us. You mentioned earlier, Chuck Knobloch, who had notorious problems with throwing the ball. Rick Ankiel also comes to my mind, a pitcher who all of a sudden couldn't.
Yeah.
So in some circumstances, like what we've talked about now is kind of general population, things that I can do better, I can improve, that increases my performance. How do you approach someone who is all the way on the edge where all of a sudden, like, or if anybody's ever seen like Charles Barkley try and swing a golf club, like you can literally see him in the middle of his swing, his body physically seizes and he stops before he continues because something is going on there. So someone who works on performance, how do you approach something that is that extreme, and how do you help an athlete like that?
With tapping, I actually am. A lot of what I do ends up being working with this condition, which is usually called the yips.
And define the word. I know the word yips, but define it for the audience.
Yips is an extreme anxiety, extreme case of what we're talking about. So what we've really been talking about this the whole time. It's just that performance is on a sliding scale, continuum from totally freed up and trusting to the yips on the far end. And everyone all the time is sliding up and down that scale, like moving to red light, yellow light, back toward green. Those are another way to say, you could say, sliding up and down this performance freedom continuum. Yep. And the yips are at the extreme end. It's very, to me, like a lot like PTSD. Yeah. I work on my website, Yips Be Gone. When I got into tapping, that's how I got into it. I was on a call with Gary Craig, and I laughed and I hung up. And then 3 years go by, and I met this guy, and he says he does this tapping, and I kind of laughed at him. And he got in my face and said, "Well, then you haven't tried it." All right. Yeah. All right, man. And we tried, and it's like, I think that helped. I think that felt good. And then I'm sitting there at reading Craig's manual, and a woman comes up to me, a baseball mom with her son. "Hey, my son just struck out to end this game, and he's going to be bummed for days. He's going to wear," we'd say, she didn't say wear it, but
yeah, absolutely,
baseball for days. He's just going to beat himself up. Is there something you can do? I said, "Well, yeah, it's important to breathe, or you could think of it this way." And she was the same thing. She get in my face. "No, isn't there something you could do?" I go, okay. Well, it's just weird, but okay. 0 to, what do you feel? Frustration, says the kid. Give me 0 to 10. How's it? 7, which is good for a guy to admit to someone he doesn't know. And then I tap on him. I do like three rounds, and I go, "Now 0 to 10. How frustrating? 4. Really?" So I have a PhD from the University of Virginia, and was still paying back my debt for that. And I could not have done that with anything I learned there. And then I did another round, 2-3 rounds, and then he kind of smiled at me. I go, "What are you smiling at?" He said, "Well, the guy made a good pitch. I had a hit earlier, and we play again tomorrow." I go, "You've got to be kidding me. It was just what it said in this manual would happen. I just didn't believe that it would." And I've been in tapping ever since. And then I got to the yips, is that I then tried it with a couple guys that had that, because I didn't have anything from my PhD world. I had nothing to deal with it. It was sort of like, I was like hospice. I was hospice, as most sports psychology guys are, for a person with the yips. I could make you feel better while your career ended. Mm-hmm. So, but with the tapping, I immediately got some really good results because it's dealing with unconscious belief. The guy typically has had some experience where a catcher throws the ball and the coach yells at him, or he overthrows the pitcher and a run scores. It's like a traumatic event that then becomes, "Oh my gosh, I'm not safe to throw this." And so fight, flight, or freeze kicks in. Excess muscle tension, loss of focus, bad throw, and now there's more data for the brain to say, "I'm not safe to throw this." Yeah. So it's all that to say that with these people, make a list of your worst events, go through and tap to clear them out.
And that's interesting in the way that you say that. One of the things that comes up is this idea of fear and what fear looks like in this process. Oftentimes I'm working with clients, I'm consistently asking them, what is this part afraid is going to go wrong? And the word you used in there is safety. And so the safest thing for me not to do is not to throw the ball.
Right.
Because if I don't throw the ball, nothing's going to happen. And now I'm in a circumstance where there's a part of me that's saying don't throw the ball, and there's my instinct that wants me to do something that is making it really, really hard. And all of a sudden now it's almost I'm of two minds, and my physical body is clashing with itself. And obviously I'm going to throw it very, very poorly.
Yep.
And in all of the stuff that we do, looking at that, what could possibly go wrong if I do this?
Yep.
And being able to get that feeling and that sensation to be proportionate and well-informed makes it possible for us to take whatever action is in front of us as we're facing that thing, because the fear of the consequences, because oftentimes, like, fear's good. I consistently talk about this with my clients all the time. Fear's good. Fear keeps me safe. I don't go climb into the lion cage at the Bronx Zoo because I recognize that's a dangerous thing, but it's only useful when it's proportionate.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about here. Is there are consequences for failing at anything that we do, failing athletically, failing practically in our day. Like there are consequences for that. The fear oftentimes is working from a sense of consequences is much bigger than actually is there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all right on for me what goes on, and for oddly to me that so many people in sports psychology don't get that or don't see it that way, and then they don't necessarily have the tool to do that. And the key element becomes the brain apparently is not able to distinguish between something that's a real threat or like a perceived thing. And most of because sports, it's like, I can't throw the ball back to the pitcher. Come on. And a mom will say, honey, I love you no matter how you throw the ball. But it's like talking to the lizard. To me, the lower part of the brain is like a lizard. Yep. And it's like the lizard doesn't speak English. So you can say, hey, just relax and throw. You've done it a million times. Take a breath, visualize the ball going there. And just remember, honey, I love you so much no matter how you do it. Well, that's like telling a lizard, hey, I'll give you food for life if you roll over.
Right.
He doesn't do it.
Right.
Why? Because he doesn't speak English. And that it's just the normal stuff that we talk about in sports psychology, in my experience, doesn't speak lizard. And tapping speaks lizard. Is really the best tool, the only one that I've found that can really speak lizard.
And what's interesting inside of that is, you'd mentioned this earlier, the way that fear grows. Is that I'm afraid something is going to go wrong. The fear gets in the way of me doing this thing successfully. I don't do it very well. I've now added this micro dose of proof that fear was accurate. Yeah, it's the reason why people who become afraid of the world lock themselves away, and it just doesn't happen in an instant. Like they slowly retreat, because the world becomes more and more dangerous in their perception, because we have this bias towards things are going to go badly, and therefore I notice the things went badly. So I've just proved the fear is true, and our experience is giving us all of this extra data, and we can't intellectualize our way out of the data the world's given us. That tapping is the way that allows us to kind of unravel that in any of the performance that we have.
I talk about it as an umpire and making a decision whether you're safe or out safety. And it might be more accurate to say an judge. The judge is like weighing this information to me, like, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Is a constant question for us. And well, let's look to past similar circumstances. And if you Google throwing the ball to the pitcher, and up comes all this horror memories that have emotions attached to them, then it's like, no, it's not safe. Okay, goes to the lizard, and the lizard clamps it down, and you're in big trouble. But if that judge says, well, let's look to the past, how's it gone? Yeah, may have made some bad throws, but the emotional connection to those memories has been broken, which to me is a lot of what tapping can do. Is that, I made bad throws, but so what? That has nothing to do with this throw. So yes, I'm safe. And then your motor program runs without interference.
Yeah. So, and it's, I think the thing that's so key in all of this is, the resource state that we're in when we do a task. And basically the conversation is just about how do we figure out what are the things that are in the way of the resource state that we're in,
Right.
and what are the tools that we can use inside of the moment. And when we recognize with any task that is in front of us, and obviously, I think the thing that kind of magnifies all of this is the stakes. There's very little fear that is going to show up when I go to do the dishes before I leave town today. That's even though I've been in a circumstance where I've dropped glasses and I've broke things before, but getting the dishes in the dishwasher, the stakes are so low, that fear doesn't show up. It's when we're doing tasks that are high value to us. I am having a difficult conversation with someone. I am trying to achieve something at work. I'm trying to sell something. The athletic stuff that we're talking about of executing in a game circumstance, that as the stakes rise, the fear becomes more pronounced because it wants us to be safe. And because the stakes are higher, there's more likely that we'll be unsafe because it could go wrong.
Right. So I look at it in terms of two worlds that I work with people on. One is that perception, because it's what you're talking about really is perceived stakes. How big a deal is this in your perception? Is it perceived as fun? When I talked to Derek Jeter, how do you deal with Yankee Stadium pressure? 50,000 screaming people. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so much fun. The more people, it's more fun. It says look.
Yeah.
But most people, fun, that is not fun because they perceive it as a threat. He perceived it as fun, which then opens up his motor programs are free to run, or if it's perceived as a threat, in comes the distraction, in comes the excess muscle tension. So that's the most important. If I have an hour to work with an athlete, I'm going to spend about 50 minutes on that. How is it occurring to you? We don't live in an is world. We live in an occurring world. How is this occurring to you? And have it be fun. Oh, it's a fun challenge. But then it's okay, I have no idea how this is going to show up for you when you have your volleyball game tonight. So let's have a clear plan for what you're going to do, no matter how you feel. You have that's back on your routine. Here's what I'm going to do, no matter how. I've got to compete with what I have today. It's not. I might have to perform in a red light situation all night. Okay. I'm going to be a warrior and execute your routine. I have a thing called ABCs. A is act big, so physically, how are you going to move it? B is breathe big. C is commit big. That's the critical. I'm all in on the critical variable. So I'm going to go out and do my ABCs. How I feel. So we break down how do you move, how do you breathe, how and when, and then what do you commit to and when. Even if you feel horrible and just screwed up the last 3 balls, or if you're totally in the zone and you're feeling great. So that's what I mean by, it's New Orleans had levees, but they were no match for Katrina. So the level of perception is the Katrina. So if I can use tapping mostly, and a lot of NLP stuff, and other things, but mostly tapping to try and cut the legs out from Katrina before it comes ashore. But then I'm also going to have the levees, this be as strong as I can, which will be the techniques of, okay, what do I feet, focus, follow through to really break down a throw so that a guy can have variables to focus on right through the execution of the task, which give him all of this, of course, just gives you your best chance for success. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to perform.
And I think the most important word that came out of that thing there is that word perceive, and how we perceive what is going on, and we are going to respond to the world in the way that we perceive what is going on.
Yeah.
It's not what is, it's what we think it is.
Yeah, there's a book, it's like the 3 laws of performance or something, where the first one is people perform consistent with how the world occurs to them.
Yeah.
That's a paraphrase or something, but it's hey, is this for Derek Jeter, World Series? Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. It's going to be great. And, majority of players oh my gosh, this is my one chance. Don't blow it. Don't screw up. I better not make a hope, but I'm not the GOAT. I hope I don't. It's this is it. Ugh. And now distraction and excess tension is going to create a great deal of interference with that guy's performance. So, but because that's why we also focus, keep your process greater than your outcome. So you want to stay locked in on the process of playing, not be attached to your outcomes. But then you can lose if what happened to me, say in my early days of being a head baseball coach, coming out with PhD all still shining, was I let the guys get so into the process that they didn't compete with the fire they needed to win. So it became about playing beautifully rather than winning the game. And But if you're all focused on winning the game and getting a hit, that's too much too. And that's back on this.
Yeah, finding that middle space.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, this has all been really, really helpful, Tom. Thanks for your time today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's fun. I love it.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. That is one of those conversations that there's so much information inside of it. It is one of those ones that is worth revisiting a couple of more times because there is so much good, comprehensive information inside of that conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Tom and the amazing resources that he has created around performance, and again, even if you're not an athlete, the information is good and useful. All you need to do is go to tappingpodcast.com, click on the link for episode 346. That's tappingpodcast.com. Click on the link for episode 346, and you will find all of the information about Tom and his amazing resources. And if you go to that page, you will also find 400 other podcasts that have amazing information, interviews just like this, tap along, audios, instruction. All of it is sitting there absolutely free of charge. Also, you will see instructions on how you can get all of the newest audios delivered to your smartphone, your tablet, your computer, so you are not missing out on any of the episodes, absolutely free as we move forward. If there is someone in your life who could use the information that we shared today, please, please, please be our ambassador. You don't need to go spam your inbox and send this to everybody in the world. But if you know someone who would find this information useful, it would mean the world to me if you would pass it along. The most common way people find audio-like podcasts on the internet is from recommendations from friends and loved ones. It would mean the world to me, and you would be giving something useful to the person that you adore as well. So just drop them a note and send them to this particular episode of the podcast. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have a topic you would like us to cover at some point in the future, I would love to hear from you. You can email me, Gene, Gene, at tappingqna.com. If you're on the website, click on the contact link. If you are one of those thousands of people who have downloaded the Tapping Q&A app, just click on the contact link inside of that. You can send me an email or a voicemail from right inside of the app. If you have not downloaded the app yet, you can go into the Apple App Store. You can go into the Android App Store. Just look for Tapping Q&A. In addition to having access to the entire audio archive from tappingqa.com, there's also tapping scripts and a lot of bonuses that only exist in the app, and it is absolutely free. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyrighted Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.